Good morning on the West Coast and good afternoon on the East Coast. Today is Wednesday, July 20th, and we are smack dab in the middle of the dog days of summer, my friends. I hope your tans are radiant and your smiles are bright. I'm John Yerington, CEO of the Performance-Driven Marketing Institute, a 501c6 not-for-profit trade association dedicated to protecting, promoting, and advancing the direct-to-consumer and direct response advertising industries. And on behalf of the entire PDMI family, it's my pleasure to welcome you back to yet another fun-filled and exciting episode of the PDMI Take 20. As a reminder, the PDMI Take 20 is a quick-hitting roundtable discussion led by industry experts on trending topics, all in 20 minutes or less. Today, we are joined with Todd Harrison of Venable, a PDMI member company, and we'll be talking about the state of CBD marketplace. However, before we get started, please allow me to do a little housekeeping. If you'd like to ask a question, and we encourage you to do so, please use your questions tab located in the control panel. Please also know you're welcome to ask questions throughout today's conversation, but we will hold all replies to the end of today's discussion. Alrighty, folks, with that said, it's my pleasure to introduce you to today's moderator. When he has a 50-50 shot, the odds are 80-20 in his favor. He is the fearless Chris Foster. Chris is Vice President of New Business Development at Modern Postcard, a direct marketing agency located in Carlsbad, California. In addition to his day job, Chris teaches brand strategies at UCSD Extension courses, and he's the chairperson of the PDMI's Brand Response Council. As always, Chris, it's a pleasure to have you here with us today. Thank you so much, and take it away, my friend.
Well, thank you, John, so much for that wonderful introduction, and welcome in, Todd, for your very first Take 20. We're delighted to have you here. So it seems to be, on the outside, if you're a marketing or a business strategist, a perfect product market fit, where the Venn diagram of what customers want overlaps with a product that perhaps meet their needs. For some background, there are 50 million Americans self-identifying as suffering from chronic pain, 1 in 5 from anxiety, and 1 in 3 from sleep disorders. That's a lot of people. And in the marketplace, CBD is seen by many as a balm for a lot of those conditions. So it's no surprise that CBD has been projected to grow to 19.5 billion market by 2025. That's just in a handful of years, and it's grown exponentially over the last several years, with not only with revenue, but a lot more brands coming through. What is the surprise also is the complex restrictions in marketing, legality, and the state-by-state thresholds that are put in place. Federal regulations usually follow the markets and the money, but we don't know if that will happen with CBD. And we all know that the environment is not going to stay the same. Whatever will happen in the next 3 to 5 years definitely won't be happening as to what's happening right now in the state of the market. So Todd, I'm so glad you came to join us. We have so many questions as it relates to the legality, regulations, the marketing side. But firstly, what I'd love to do is to kind of get a really high level global view of, as you see the CBD marketplace changing, the question that everybody really wants to ask is, do you see the CBD market growing as projected, remaining as it is, or actually declining in the next 3 to 5 years?
Well, I think it is likely to decline unless the science starts catching up with where everybody thinks it is. Because as you said, everybody thinks it's a balm for anxiety, sleep, pain, and they think it's going to cure all their cure-alls. I mean, I was telling you prior, my kids think it's legal marijuana, which it's not. It's not THC. It's not going to give you that. It's not going to give you a high or make you feel good. But the promise of CBD is what has been sold since 2015. The science has not caught up with the promise of CBD yet. It may very well, and if it does catch up, I could see it hitting those projections. However, if it doesn't catch up and it starts to peter out, or as I indicated during our pre-discussions, that a lot of times these ingredients have a 3 to 4 year shelf life, and then they're off to the next and best thing. It might be a different cannabinoid by that time. It could be CBN, it could be CBG, it could be CBDA, it could be many different things, or it may be ashwagandha, or curcumin is a turmeric, is a very popular one now. So as people get these ideas that, oh, here's my magic elixir, there's a lot of interest in it. But if the science doesn't end up bearing it out, then the interest will phase away. So I'm kind of on the fence of where it's going, because I think we're still ahead of the curve. And if the science catches up, it could very well hit those projections.
Well, what I love about that concept and that image of it being ahead of its own self, right? And the idea that in terms of its marketability, in terms of its revenue, in terms of the number of brands coming on, it is true that there hasn't necessarily been the scientific research that is developed to keep a pace. Do you think that there are movements from the market space and from those brands to try to enlist the science community to start getting that research out there to add more credibility to their product lines?
Yes, I do believe there is that credibility in there, that people want to develop the science, and they believe in the science, and they believe in the potential of CBD, especially when you look at what some of the things that the endocannabinoid system helps regulate in our body, which includes pain, includes blood sugar, for instance. So all those things, if we get a better understanding of how these things interact, I think absolutely that companies want to show that, because ultimately, I believe that most companies, you always have rogue companies everywhere, but most companies want to do the responsible thing, and they want to make sure they're selling safe and effective products for their consumers.
So Todd, I guess I have a question for you, because we know that there are marketing regulations of the yin yang for CBD products, right? They cannot use digital advertising, straight up direct marketing digital advertising, or Facebook ads or Google ads, restrictions on radio, restrictions in media. Here in San Diego, we have some brands that can only have billboards in neighborhoods where 80% of the population is over 21. And then there's certain regulations and restrictions as to the imagery that you can use. So there's a whole host of binding elements and boundaries for these brands. And I'm wondering if there's a link or almost a dependency set up where if the science can prove the efficacy, does that help some of the federal regulations in terms of some of the marketing?
I think the problem on the federal level is this, is FDA likes the concept of enforcement discretion.
Can you say that phrase one more time?
The concept of enforcement discretion.
Okay.
So this is a position where the agency can come in, and this is basically what they've done. We don't think CBD is a lawfully marketed dietary ingredient or food ingredient. We don't think it's grass, and no pun intended. Grass is generally recognized as safe for use in food. That's FDA's official position. But they don't do anything to remove the ingredient off the marketplace. They don't want the political consequences of it. They don't like the political consequences of it. Plus, I don't think they have a concern over safety. So they have these things where, okay, we're going to let them continue to market, and we'll let the marketplace try to regulate it. What happens in this situation, and what's happening with cannabis in general, is that we have all these state-by-state laws and restrictions, and trying to keep up with all these things, it's really difficult. CBD that's sold in inside a dispensary is generally from marijuana, could have THC with it, where if it's sold at your neighborhood pharmacy, it does not. It's just CBD. So you're trying to understand and navigate all these different state regulations. And some of the states, the regulations and the labels and labeling requirements are different. Well, what's really hard for a company is to come up with a label that is appropriate for all 50 states, because you may have states that are very restrictive. So oftentimes what we tell clients is that let's just go with the most restrictive state, which makes it easier for you to get in that state, but you got to comply with those state laws. And then, we have the animal industry in there, for equines and for companion animals. And so we have all these different rules and regulations, mainly because we have a federal agency that refuses to admit that, okay, you can market the ingredient, and these are going to be the rules by which you do it. I mean, FDA could probably resolve this pretty quickly if they wanted to, and they could say they preempt all the other state laws, but it does not, because they don't want, the agency does not want to take a position. They want to take a position, but they don't want to be sued over that position. So what's really bad about on that level is that FDA can send these warning letters out to all these companies in which they've said, not only are your claims bad, but also you're an unlawful ingredient. But a company has no recourse. I can't sue FDA over it because that's not final agency action. So if I sued FDA over that warning letter, DOJ would come in and tell the court to dismiss it. Well, they haven't taken regulatory action against them. They haven't seized their product. They haven't done anything. So it leaves everything in limbo. So you have, like you said, restrictions in Amazon. So what has that done with Amazon? Well, then people market the same product on Amazon as they do in other places. They just remove the word CBD off the label. Now consumers don't even know what they're getting. They're thinking they're getting hemp oil, and it's probably just CBD. So, but this is what is caused because you have different, private companies deciding what they will and will not allow, or you'll have them we'll allow it online, but we won't allow it in our brick and mortar stores.
Sure. And I think what's interesting about that, Todd, is that oftentimes folks will say, well, the market will take care of itself. The market will determine, how it flows and let the consumers in the marketplace kind of bear out and let that be the place where the truth is revealed. But the challenge with that is that the marketplace is kind of like the wild, wild west. There are no rules and or regulations. And when you talk about e-commerce brands versus in-store brands or a hybrid, right? I've got clients who are in-store and e-commerce. I've got a client that is their in-store is in Pennsylvania, but Delaware doesn't allow the product. So they market to Delawareans to come into Pennsylvania in-store to purchase the product, and there are regulations with e-commerce. So to the point of being in limbo and in this confusing place, it's astonishing to me that in the confusion and the chaos, the market is still growing. And there are new brands coming in, there are new products coming in. Now, granted, most CBD brands command a very small market share. There are a handful of very large clients that dominate, but there's still room for most of these. The one thing we did study, though, is the retention rates. And I'm gonna ask you a question about this and about growth. CBD brands have a wonderful and envious conversion rate online versus normal online retailers. Plus, they have a heady retention rate of almost 80+%. The challenge that CBD brands have with regulations is acquiring new customers. So I guess one of my questions for you is there any room from a marketing side for these new brands in terms of regulation, or do you think that those regulations are going to persist for the next 3 to 5 years?
I think that these regulations are going to persist for a while because unless Congress decides to pass a law that just makes it clear that CBD can be marketed as a dietary supplement or as a food, I think FDA is just going to keep it where we are. So we're going to be stuck with these hodgepodges of laws. I agree with you. I think the marketplace has already spoken, and that's why FDA will never try to remove CBD from the market. They could, FDA probably has a decent legal argument. I would say it's a flip of a coin who wins that case if it's actually litigated. But with all that said, the marketplace has spoken, and they want the product, and consumers want that product, and it doesn't really present a safety issue. So who cares? That's really how FDA looks at it. But they're not going to, unless that big white building about a mile that way that I can see the top of makes a decision that we're going to pass the law, and which is interesting because it's really they have bipartisan support, which is even, these days is hard to do. I think we're going to be stuck here, and I think it's just time.
So I'll ask you then, as a human being that looks at odds and looks at prognostication over the X number of years, clearly in terms of tax revenue from these businesses, and clearly in terms of small business efforts trying to work with their local state folks in the Better Business Bureau and other small business organizations, there's a movement, I would imagine, from the business organization to pressure Congress at some level to pave the way and to kind of, you know, let this market space flourish. Do you think that's possible, especially as perhaps millennial and Generation Z Congress people come in to the fold in the next 5 to 10 years?
I think in the next 5 to 10 years it will, but I think it could happen faster if they could divorce it from cannabis itself. I think in 10 years we'll have legalized cannabis at the federal level.
Okay.
That's just.
You guys heard it. You heard it here, folks. You heard it here first on Take 20. As a note.
I think it's going to happen. The tax revenue, you know, the one thing I know about politicians, they like taxes, and they may want to call it different things, but you know, they like sin taxes in particular. I think at some point cannabis will be legalized. The problem is that it's still kind of a little bit intertwined there. For whatever reason, I don't understand it, but you have, because of FDA, you still have payment processing issues. There are payment processors who will not process because FDA has said CBD is not lawful.
Yeah. For a good example on that from the e-commerce side, we know that Shopify won't process, and Shopify has 1 million plus e-commerce businesses, one of the largest brands out there, and especially one of the easiest ones to get up and get going. And that's one of those brands where that if they don't allow it, boy, that's a big hindrance for some of these e-commerce brands trying to get on board.
So one way of doing it is maybe dealing with the financial side of it, because as you all know, probably not from the cannabis space, you have all this money being pent up in states, but they can't get it out of the state. So that legislation has to come in the next couple of years, because at some point, you got to get rid of it. You got to be able to make this electronic. You got to get the money to move electronically. So I think that will happen first, and it'll be part of the cannabis part of it.
Sure. So I guess a question for you is, what advice are you giving to new brands that are trying to figure out a new product in the CBD space? Are they behind so far? Are they forever behind, or is there room for new talent and room for new opportunity, or is there a timing issue where you advise wait, you know, take these steps first? What would be an advice for that you would give to a business that's just emerging?
So if they're just an emerging CBD brand and they're really into CBD, first of all, I would say formulate a product with something else in there, like ashwagandha, that has really good science behind it, so you can make actual claims about the product, and not worry about the FTC or the Federal Trade Commission or plaintiff attorney class action lawyers. That would be the first thing I would say. I would also say branding is very, very important. The one thing I've ever learned in my whole life was, if you know how to brand something, you can really make it work. I mean, you can look at, in the acne space, you can look at look at some of the acne brands that have flourished, and they're just benzoyl peroxide when you look at it. And so when you look at it, if you really know how to market it and you know how to target your audience and who your audience is, I think you can do it. But understand how social media works and understand who your consumer is. And I think that is, sometimes people don't understand what they really want. They just come in, I'll have clients come in and say, well, everybody else is doing it, I want to do it. It's not a good reason to do it.
Right. Excellent. So John, Todd, we could talk all day about this stuff. You're fascinating and just a font of wisdom. But John, it's already 11:21 plus, and we want to give some time for our guests to ask some questions. So I'm going to turn it over to you and see if they've got questions for John and/or myself on some of these topics that we brought up.
As they always say, when you're having fun, time flies. I can't believe I looked down at my watch and I was like, 20 minutes. Wow. So we've got some good questions coming through. This one's for Todd, of course. You had mentioned that every 3 to 4 years, there's a hot new dietary supplement in the marketplace. Do you know what was the hot product prior to CBD?
Prior to CBD?
Like acai?
Acai, yeah, acai, or Garcinia cambogia, Garcinia. And that's a very old, so I'll date myself. So the first time I ever saw Garcinia and take off in a big way was 1997. And then it came back around when they all started putting it online in the around 2010 to 2014 time. Became a very hot ingredient again. And I'm going to assume it's going to become a hot ingredient again too. Ashwagandha, like I said, was hot in the early 2000s. It's starting to heat up again. So these are things that ingredients do tend to trend through things. What's interesting when you kind of look at it though, ashwagandha and CBD kind of treat the same thing, anxiety, stress. So I think in our stressful lives that we live, and let's face it, the pandemic didn't make it any less stressful for any of us, people are looking for things that bring them a sense of calm. It's another reason why we should legalize marijuana. Just give it everybody.
Just be done with it all, right? That's a great answer. Thanks, Todd. Here's one that you've touched on when we first started the call today, but probably a good one to revisit. What would you say would be the key scientific research necessary to help ease the marketing regulations and advance the future sales of CBD marketplace?
Well, I think the key would be some human pivotal studies that show that it helps actually do what it says. So it helps with occasional sleep, because you can't say insomnia for diet. So you say for occasional sleeplessness, or it does help with pain related to exercise or things along that way. Things that promote joint comfort, things that help ease your stress. So I think good studies in that take a look at those measures and come up with positive results. And also looking at the safety profile gives assurances to the FDA this is a safe ingredient. Ultimately, what I tell people about FDA is FDA, when it comes to drugs, they're about safety and efficacy. About dietary supplements, efficacy, they're okay about it. They're really concerned about safety. They're a safety agency when it comes to dietary supplements. So that's what they're really concerned about. But I think if you show that it has health benefits, and we have these actual health benefits, it makes it easy. And it seems like the area where you see the most anecdotal information is probably in stress and anxiety.
I would say knowing that CBD is like the hottest topic out there short of blockchain, I'm shocked that this hasn't already been done.
I guess, yeah, that's my surprise too, John. I think that the lack of a serious, proven, credible scientific study as to arthritis and inflammation and the like, because the impression, and Todd, this is why we get a difference between the impression versus the actual science. The impression is that, oh yeah, this has been proven to help with this stuff, right? They don't make claims, but it seems from a marketplace that, oh, this has really helped me a lot, and all the reviews and testimonials, and the anecdotes seem to align with that position. But I'm curious as to why there has been no definitive science that the FDA would say, if you do this study, then we will approve. I'm amazed that people haven't clamored to do that.
The problem is that with dietary supplements and dietary ingredients is there's no approval process. The problem really is for a company, if I go out and do a pivotal study and I publish that pivotal study, guess who gets to use all my studies? All my competitors. So in some ways, there is a built-in inertia that tells you, well, why am I going to spend the money? Let them spend the money on the study. Mm-hmm. Instead of as an industry as a whole, let's spend the money together. Let's do a really good study. So the one thing that on the animal side, the National Animal Supplement Council of NASC is doing is that they are sponsoring a safety study on CBD in dogs.
Sure.
And they're sponsoring it because they want to show that it's safe. And I think that is, why doesn't some of these big trade associations go ahead and fund that? It's not like they don't have the money to do it, because they do. So if you want to start whittling away and making things more normal, and I always say that, to me, the 800-pound monster in the room is not really the FDA, it's the Federal Trade Commission. At some point, the Federal Trade Commission is going to get tired, and they're going to start coming after companies. And and the problem is that if you don't do the studies, you don't have a study to support your claims, well, you have a problem. We have in vitro studies. There's a lot of like cellular studies, the in vitro studies, or whatever you want to call lab studies, whatever you want to call them, that shows that they impact certain markers of inflammation. They impact certain markers in our body to that if you build it out, you probably have success. I think that if you can get the dose right, you can have a successful study. But there's no benefit to do a study in arthritis if I can't say arthritis.
Sure.
And that's one of the problems. If I can't say it, one of the things that I've always suggested for a long time is that DSHEA needs to be, Dietary Supplement Education Act needs to be amended, that if I do a clinical study on my product, and it's a good clinical study, I should be able to make the disease claim. And I'm not talking for serious disease, not cancer, not AIDS, not heart disease. I'm talking about cholesterol. I'm talking about arthritis. Osteoarthritis, quite frankly, to me, is not even a disease. Osteoarthritis is, I'm 60 years old. I wake up with aches and pains every morning. It's life, right? As we age, it is. Or stupid me, I went out and played my son's lacrosse team in basketball.
In basketball, that's right. So what we'll see, I think then, Todd, in terms of doing the study, it sounds like that's your perfect side hustle in the next couple of years. I guess we'll throw that on you.
Yeah, I would love to see it done. I think that, I would say the industry should gather their money together and spend it together. It's worth it. Look, what's the worst case scenario? I get it. It's a double-edged sword. We might prove ourselves wrong, but there's. I can't believe you have all that anecdote, and there's a lot. And people I know who take CBD, they love it.
They swear by it.
They think it's the greatest thing. It's helped them with their anxiety. It's helped them with their pain. So there has to be some truth, because the reality is that the placebo effect only lasts about 6 weeks, and then if it's after that, you pretty much show. That's why studies of 6 weeks of shorter on things like weight maintenance or weight loss and sexual health, always you can never get separation between placebo and the active, because it's a strong placebo effect. So you have to get past that placebo. It has to be long enough. You're looking at least an 8-week, if not a 12-week study.
Awesome.
Why don't we do one more question? I mean, I know we could go on for hours. I mean, we could turn this into a 2-hour webinar instead of a 20-minute webinar. But let's sneak one more in. So, if a marketer can capture and resolve the online identities of prospects showing online purchase intent for CBD in a compliant way, can the marketer legally take their unique online identifiers and append their home IP address and IP target them to drive them to a CBD website? So it's kind of a privacy IP question.
I'm not a privacy lawyer, so I don't know. I would say I probably know enough to malpractice. So, but if that person wants to email me, I have really good privacy lawyers who could answer that question for them.
So I'll answer from a market side, John. So at Modern Postcard, we offer a lot of direct marketing services, and CBD market is actually a really good market for us, because as long as your design is USPS compliant, you can use direct mail to market CBD product. So we actually have a product called direct mail retargeting, where if you are a CBD brand and someone comes to your website, and through all the privacy rules and everything's completely above board, you can actually mail a card to that address. The regulation, though, is really important. You cannot show product that has more than 0.3% THC. You can't market a product that would appeal to children. It has to be the correct website and you can't make any claims, right? So you can't have leaves, right, or show photographs of people who are in dreamland, right? So you have to comply with some of the USPS regulations, because they're federal regulations, Todd, right? And so, but if you do that, that's a marketing avenue that you can use, because the blocks on the digital side are from the Facebook and Google networks, and that's a Facebook and Google decision.
And that's their decision, but there's ways around even Google and Facebook.
Yeah, there are. One of the things that brands do is you can create third-party interstitial sites, or you can create educational sites where a Facebook post, for example, could be about chronic pain. You go to a site that talks about education and is really leaning into education. And oh, by the way, here's a cool little product that you might be interested in, right? So there are certain ways to do that. But again, if you're a small brand, there are hoops to jump through, and the hoops keep moving. So it poses just a lot of obstacles for these brands to try to hurdle over.
I'm going to jump back in here, guys, so we can close this thing out. But I got to say, phenomenal session. What a wonderful conversation. So much content in such a short period of time. Thank you, Todd. Thank you, Chris. Well, folks, I hope you enjoyed today's conversation as much as I did. Before we close out, I'd like to take a moment to invite you to join us for our next episode of the PDMI's Take 20, hosted Wednesday, August 3rd at 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern. I'd also like to remind you that PDMI's fall conference, PDMI West, is scheduled for October 24th to 26th in San Diego at the Hard Rock Hotel. Registration is now open and rooms are going fast. To get your badge and to reserve your room, please visit thepdmi.com. That's thepdmi.com. Thanks again, everyone. Make it a great day. Enjoy summer and hope to see you all soon.